Omaha Beach, the bloodiest morning of D-Day, the prelude, the calm before the inferno, the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, in the English Channel did not promise glory. They promised misery. For the thousands of young American men aboard transport ships, most between the ages of 19 and 24, the wait was psychological torture. The sea was violent, with 6-foot swells tossing the landing craft vehicle personnel LCVPs, or Higgins boats like toys. The air was a thick mix of diesel fumes and vomit. Many had been seasick fraus, dehydrated and exhausted before they even caught sight of the coast. Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower's plan was complex, but at Omaha Beach, the objective was brutally simple. Secure a 5-mile beachhead between Vierville-sur-Mer to the west and Colville-sur-Mer to the east. This was the vital link between the British at Gold Beach and the Americans at Utah Beach. If Omaha failed, the invasion would be cut in half. But the geography was a death trap. Omaha was not flat. It ended in a bank of heavy shingle pebbles, and immediately behind that, steep bluffs rising 100 to 150 feet dominated the view. Field Marshal Rommel had transformed these heights into the perfect kill zone. The failure of the initial shield before a single boot touched the sand, 3 catastrophes occurred, sealing the fate of the first wave. The aerial bombardment failed. Over 400 B-2 for Liberator bombers arrived to soften the coastal defenses. Due to low visibility and the fear of hitting their own troops, they delayed their bomb release by just a few seconds. The result? 13,000 bombs fell harmlessly in the fields behind the bluffs. The German bunkers remained intact. The naval bombardment was short. Warships had a limited window to fire. Smoke and mist obscured their targets, and most shells overshot the machine gun nests. The disaster of the DD tanks, the Allied secret weapon, duplex-drive amphibious Sherman tanks, was supposed to provide cover for the infantry. Launched too far out in heavy seas, they sank like stones. In the eastern sector, out of 38 tanks launched, 27 went to the bottom of the sea, taking their crews with them. The infantry would arrive alone, without armored support. Worse yet, Allied intelligence had failed. They expected to find low-quality reservists. Instead, they found the 352nd Infantry Division, hardened veterans of the Eastern Front who happened to be stationed there for anti-invasion exercises. Each hour, 6:30, the slaughterhouse. When the ramps of the landing craft dropped at 6:30, there was no dash for the beach. There was only annihilation. Across the sectors codenamed Dog Green, Easy Red, and Fox Green, German MG-42 machine guns capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute opened a crossfire. They didn't need to aim. They simply swept the ramps. Company of the 116th Regiment, 29th Division, hailing from the Virginia National Guard, was decimated in minutes. Men weighed down by 80 pounds of gear jumped into deep water to avoid the fire and sank immediately, drowning without firing a shot. Those who emerged were picked off in the water. The sea literally turned dark red with blood within minutes. Within 10 minutes, Company was leaderless and non-operational. 96% of the unit was lost. Logistical chaos, the strong current pushed the landing craft eastward, scrambling the units. The 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, and the 29th Infantry Division landed in the wrong places, intermingled, without officers. And without radios, the radio operators were often the first targets for German snipers. Survivors crawled through the wet sand, hiding behind the steel obstacles Rommel had installed the Czech hedgehogs. But these obstacles were mined. As the tide rose, the safe space on the beach vanished. Medics tried to treat the wounded at the water's edge, only to watch them be swallowed by the incoming crimson tide. 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Paralysis and the shingle an hour into the assault. The attack was paralyzed. There was no forward movement. Thousands of men lay prone on the shingle bank at the base of the dunes, paralyzed by fear and the relentless mortar fire. The original plan was to move through the natural draws ravines that led to the top of the bluffs. But these draws were the most heavily defended areas, blocked by concrete walls and covered by 88mm cannons. Attempting them was suicide. Aboard the command ship, General Omar Bradley received such catastrophic reports that he seriously considered aborting the operation at Omaha and redirecting the remaining troops to Eudor and the Brightus. Age sectors. Omaha was on the verge of becoming a historic defeat. The turning point, leadership where it counts. The battle was not won by generals looking at maps, but by lieutenants, sergeants, and privates who realized that staying on the beach meant certain death. The destroyers move in seeing the slaughter, the captains of several U.S. Navy destroyers such as the USS Frankfurt and USS McCook broke protocol. They sailed dangerously close to the shore, risking grounding their ships, coming within 800 yards of the sand. They began firing their 5-inch guns point-blank into the German bunkers on the bluffs. It was the first real relief for the infantry. The American spirit awakens in the midst of the chaos. Natural leaders emerged. Colonel George Taylor, commander of the 16th Regiment, reached the beach, saw men huddled in terror, and shouted the words that became legend. There are only two kinds of people on this beach, those who are dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. Brigadier General Norman Cotter, assistant commander of the 29th Division, walked upright under fire, inspiring his men with almost insane calm. He organized small, improvised groups and identified the weak point, not the draws, but the steep cliffs between them. The breakout, inch by inch small groups of rangers and infantry began to scale the steep, brush-covered slopes under the cover of smoke. Engineering under fire, combat engineers, who suffered 40% casualties, finally managed to blow gaps in the beach obstacles and used Bangalore torpedoes to blast through the concertina wire at the top of the shingle. The ascent, without central coordination, isolated platoons climbed the heights. Grabbing roots and grass, they reached the top and flanked the German bunkers. Brutal trench warfare, grenades, and hand-to-hand combat ensued. The fall of W in 62, the fortified strongpoint wide as Stansnest 62, which had caused so much destruction, was finally surrounded. By 10 o'clock a.m., the first American units were on top of the hills. The crust of the German defense was broken. The Germans, lacking immediate reserves to counterattack, began to pull back. The end of the day, the cost of freedom by noon, the existential crisis had passed. The draws at Vival and Este, Laurent were finally opened. Tanks and trucks began to crawl up toward the French interior. As night fell on June 6th, the Americans held a strip of land only about 1.5 miles deep. The 5-mile objective had not been met, but the beach was theirs. The toll, approximately 30 for 1,000 troops landed at Omaha that day. The cost was astronomical. Over 2,400 American casualties killed, wounded, and missing occurred in the first few hours alone. Entire units had ceased to exist. The sand of Omaha was covered in wreckage, burned-out vehicles, life jackets, and letters from home scattered in the wind. But through that carnage, Hitler's Atlantic Wall had been breached. Today, overlooking that beach, sits the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial. 9,387 white marble headstones, Latin crosses, and stars of David stand in military precision, facing west toward America. Omaha Beach was not a victory of brilliant strategy. It was a victory of raw courage, stubbornness, and the sacrifice of ordinary men teachers, farmers, clerks who, when faced with the impossible, decided that the only acceptable direction was forward. That was the bloodiest morning of D-Day.